Always so you close the other door.
Yes, I was just with somebody who was at McDonald's this morning. Yes, you were here. It's like,
All right, I think we're gonna get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our topic on demystifying data as a product. We're really excited to be here to talk about this topic. Karina and I have actually worked together for over a year now, and we're really happy to kind of give our knowledge on this topic, give you a different perspective. So we will, again, thank you for choosing to come to this topic. We're really excited. So let's start with our intros. My name is Melinda Rodriguez. I am a senior delivery principal consultant here at Slalom. I've been here for 7.5 years. And so I've been really focusing on product development, helping clients with different type of needs. And so my experience really spans across multiple industries. I have helped with custom app development, API development, data migration, data ingestion with IoT devices, as well as my current role, which is a product leader at a data transformation initiative at the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago. So I'm really excited to be here. Just some personal things about me: Chicago born and raised, got 2 kids, Mia and Jaden, and I'm a dog mom of 1. As well. As you can tell, I love plants. I think during the pandemic, I picked up a green thumb. Before the pandemic, I couldn't keep one plant alive. But being at home all the time, I don't know, it just became a thing. So I've like 15 plants in my office that keep me, with a lot of oxygen. So you can see I'm like in my element. I just love plants. I'm also really passionate about empowering women in technology. I joined, at Northeastern Illinois University as like one of 30 women, or one, and there's like 30 men, and so really just passionate about that, and also mentorship. So enough about me. I'll pass it over to Karina to kind of talk about herself.
Thanks, Melinda. Hi, everyone. My name is Karina Pekala. I am a solution owner at the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago, and I work in the data and analytics transformation team. So my role splits between product management, project management, and product ownership. So my calendar is pretty busy throughout the day. I've been at the bank for about 4 years, and I've been working with Melinda for about a year, like she said, 6 years total in the banking industry. So I was born in Poland and raised in Chicago. And when I'm not at the bank or when I'm not working, I'm either in Pilates or I'm working on my grilling skills. So I've perfected grilling a steak this summer. So if anybody wants to ask about that after, if you're not interested in data, happy to talk about that too. But I'm also a women's ERG and CHAMP mentorship program ambassador at the bank. So those are things that just excite me and little passion projects on the side. So very happy to be here today.
All right. So let's get started and talk about what the session is going to be about, what you can expect. We're going to give you our perspective on data as a product. What we would love for this to be interactive. We don't want this to be a lecture. We ask for your participation. We definitely want you to be curious, have an open mind. So definitely ask us questions throughout. This is, again, like we've planned for 30 minutes and this is 50. So we really want you to ask questions. Coming out of this, we're definitely going to give you our experiences on different facets of data as a product, but also really equipping you and giving you knowledge on how to get started, building out a business case, talking through like getting leadership buy-in, really developing and designing a data strategy, as well as activating upon that strategy. So before we even dive into like defining it, really, I want to kind of talk about data at its core and how important it is. It really drives, I mean, all of you know, right? It really drives to generate business insights. It fosters innovative thinking. It allows your organization to be to have data-driven decision making, provide some kind of metrics on success. And I know it's kind of hard. I think all of you are here because, tech products, like mobile apps, really putting a SaaS product into your ecosystem is a lot more tangible. It's a lot easier for people to think of those as products, where data, all these things that I mentioned earlier, super important to your organization. So why can't it be a standalone product? So that's kind of the theme that we're going to be going through today, is trying to convince you or not convince you of putting data as a product. So we'll help define that. But again, before we go into defining it, I really want you to think about these apps. Think about your favorite app even. Like, these are not my favorite apps, but I use it kind of on the day-to-day. So without data, what are these? They're really nothing, you know, and data really drives that user adoption. It allows you to interact with it and really use it on your day-to-day. So again, I asked the question, why can't data be an independent product? So this is the participation part of the program. So if anyone out there want to take a stab at what they think data as a product is? Yeah, go for it.
APIs.
Okay, all right. Anyone else? Yeah, go for it.
Data sets that can be used by downstream users to things, apps, for instance, or
Awesome.
analytics boards.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Yeah, go for it.
Monetize data fees like.
Yep.
The data as a product is consuming the data, making sure that it's used and it's, there's sort of like a data dictionary that everybody understands.
Governed data. Love all those answers.
Yeah, go for it.
All the stuff that Google collects on you that it sells to its marketers.
Yeah, yeah. Go
I
for
can
it.
use an example. So my current client, the data team was always like not thought of as a product team. And over the last year, that's one thing that we changed that mentality because we consume data from other databases throughout the ecosystem.
Mhm.
We create our own data warehouse and then other reporting services pull from that data warehouse. So we just said, well, our data warehouse is our product.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
we ingest it and then we have consumers of it. So
Absolutely. Go for it. I'll take
I-
this last one.
Feel like analyzing and gathering different types of data and then making informed decisions and doing user insights out of it and then putting it into a product.
Absolutely. I mean, all these answers are different, right? And this is kind of why we're here. So I want to I have the two things, data as a product and data product. And I want to make sure we differentiate between those things because I think some people said data as a product concepts and some people said data products, right? So really it's a concept. It's a concept of thinking that data can be a traditional product and really having your users' needs at the heart of the design. So it's really thinking of that. And if you don't really think it can be, then hopefully we can convince you today that it can be. And so it's really that concept and really having that data mindset. And so let's talk about data products because I was going to go to the crowd, but a lot of you actually called them out, right? Data warehouses, dashboards, analytic tools. So these are kind of the more tangible things that people can use as assets within their organization to produce the things I mentioned earlier, right? Business insights, providing in problem solving for your organization and meeting just some kind of needs and driving decisions for those objectives that you have. So we're going to now, as we've defined it, we're going to now go into the business case. So I'm going to pass it over to Karina.
Thank you, Melinda. All right, so a couple key things to consider when writing your business case. So there are a couple challenges that I know my organization faces, and I'm sure a lot of your organizations face too, and that's having a nearsighted view on data. We often forget how valuable of a product's data actually is, and we tend to put it in the back seat. So data is frequently undervalued and overlooked. Oftentimes when decisions are being made behind closed doors of conference rooms, those decisions are being made based on either stale data or legacy knowledge of someone who's been in that position for a bunch of years or just general insights or intuition. When we combine insights and intuition, that's when we can actually make decisions that drive actionable insights and drive results for a company. So when we put data in the backseat, significant gaps in productivity exist. If you think back on the slides that Melinda showed or the apps Melinda showed a couple slides ago, if you take out all of the data from those applications, you're really left with a pretty background. So you're not able to either order your favorite food or book a table at your favorite restaurant or even apply for a mortgage loan online. So if you take out data out of all of those applications, productivity out the window. When productivity is out the window, significant data silos are a hindrance to the collaboration. So I know that in my organization, and I'm sure in many other organizations, we have a lot of departments calculating the same equation or trying to get the same solution or trying to find the same number for whatever equation or variable. They're all rounding to a different decimal point. So while they might somewhat get a similar answer, it's never the same answer. And until that data is democratized and everyone has access to that data and can collaborate with it, we won't be able to drive the solutions that we truly need from that data. So when working with your customers or consumers, think of their business needs. Really put yourself into their shoes. And when you're holding these interviews with your stakeholders and trying to understand what specific use cases or problems you're trying to solve for, think about the different use cases for data products. So we have 4 on the screen here. The first is a data migration. So think of this as moving from a legacy system to a newer technology. This can be like moving from an old enterprise data warehouse or a couple enterprise data warehouses to one data lake solution. New technology, more of a lift and shift. So next up is a data transformation. And this is something that's very near and dear to Melinda and I's heart, because this is something that we've been working on for the past year. So we're really modernizing the solution that we have at the bank and bringing it to scale and enhancing our analytic capabilities. So a big portion of data transformation that people tend to forget about is the cultural shift that comes with it. So you need to make sure that your company or organization has a strong data literacy program and people are actually understanding what they can do with the data and how to potentially rationalize reports and repoint from a legacy system to new reporting technologies. Next up is becoming a data-driven organization, and that's really using data as a strategic asset. So when organizations use data as a strategic asset, they're solving problems for that their customers probably don't even know exist. And up next, we have data-driven innovation. So building innovative products using data. If any one of you probably shopped on Amazon in the past week, either buying sandals, jeans, new AirPods, or anything else, I know mine burnt out a couple days ago. But if you're now seeing ads for random projects or products related to those items, that's because they're using data-driven innovation and are trying to sell more products to you.
All right.
I'll pass it up to Melinda to talk about executive sponsorship.
Okay, so those are obviously Karina went over some key considerations to really building that case and finding just the problems that you're trying to solve at that organization or your organization. So I just want to talk about getting that now leadership buy-in, right? Because again, not many leaders see this as a product, and we need to kind of bring them along the ride. And so it's do your research, know your company's strategic priorities, whether that be 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, so that you know that your data product actually aligns to those objectives. And then also get to know your leaders, really understand who your champions are for your data product that really understand the concept and are able to kind of give the nudge to other leaders in that organization to provide, that just all the hard work that you did and the business case that you put together. And really just cater to their style. So I'm just going to tell a quick little story. Went to a Women in Product meetup a few weeks ago, and there was a VP of product there, and she was talking about how her leaders love white papers, right? And so she's like, oh, I have this cool idea that I want to give. I have this product that I have that I want to like really incorporate into my organization. And then she was like, how do I even start to tell them and propose this to them? So she did it white paper style, right? And I think the moral of the story is try to cater to your leadership and how they'll retain that information, because I think you'll get an easier sell if you're not just giving them a PowerPoint presentation and they're just like, okay, that's not enough for me. So really getting to know your leaders is key to get that buy-in that you need. And then building that strong business case. So a lot of this is going to tie back to some of the other concepts we have. And so demonstrating what the ROI is for your data product so that they know what are they getting out of it? What is the company? What are the benefits that they're going to get? And then also understanding the success metrics. So I think leaders will appreciate when you are thoughtful about this product that you have and that you're trying to put forward, and then being able to say, hey, okay, once we have this live in production, what does this mean? Did I reduce the amount of other analytics that we have in the organization to have this one? Did I reduce the amount of databases? I mean, that is one thing we're dealing with is there's a lot of disparate databases across the organization, and we're trying to centralize this for them. And so what are those KPIs that are there for success that you know that they're going to need to hear so they can have that little extra push to get bought in?
And a big thing is, if you don't ask, you'll never know. So if you don't build that business case, if you don't ask leadership for helping you solve this problem, you just won't be able to solve the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, please.
Go back one
Yeah.
slide. So I think the last point there is really important, the KPI one. It's also maybe the most difficult thing to do with products.
Yes.
The data product itself is very difficult, possible to quantify the value of it. Downstream users of that product that create the value, their products, right? Generating value off of your data. And a lot of what you do when you try to come up with assess the value, you educated guesses of value we generate for the business, but that is still just it's more or less.
I love that you call that out because let me tell you, we're actually in the process of doing this right now at the organization. Is one, it's such a big project. It's a transformation, right? And we're just like, where do we even start? We're kind of broken up by pillars. So we have data governance, we have business intelligence, we've got data engineering, we have change management, right? And all of those components, it's like, how do we measure success holistically, but also how do we measure success within those pillars? It's difficult. And we're trying to baseline right now to then start measuring, the next year and the next year after that. And it's like, it really takes like a thoughtful eye and brainstorming amongst all the smart people, to get to that place, because we're still tweaking it, right? And it's not easy, for sure. Thank you.
Well, I just want to call something out too. Like, it's one thing to create something that new, but when you're talking about migrating legacy databases, re-architecting what's under the hood, well, people always love dollar signs and how can you save us money?
Yeah.
And I'd say the very first thing you should do is assess so I think we all know that think about cloud infrastructure and just say AWS as an example, all their services, the most expensive part of the bill is the database storage. But it's not even just the database storage, it's all the replication tools. And if you think about, again, if I just use AWS as an example, if you're using the right solution, the right tools, you could very easily identify opportunities to save significant amount of money that nobody realizes behind the scenes, like data replication is a good example. You can have a very large database that's replicating nightly that does not need to be doing that. So they always like to see where we save money. I
Exactly.
think that's a very
And
important.
when you have multiple databases replicating nightly,
Yeah.
that really adds up.
Yep. And there in the back.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to demonstrate the ROI is the speed with which each disparate system now with the data lake is able to communicate with each other. So you're able to get these insights together. You could have inventory, store management, everybody, being able to access the data right away and not have a lag time. So that's the way kind of I found that
Yeah, that's it.
ROI is clearly defined. You're able to get the responses of what you're looking for, and you don't need to talk to another system. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's not only resources. Somebody mentioned, I think you mentioned cleaning, data cleaning, and like how many times do people at your organization have to clean the data? They might spend, 30 hours a week doing that. And so it's not only cost savings of like infrastructure and all of that, but it's even like efficiency within processes within the organization.
Yeah, to that point, on ROI, I think a lot of people don't pay attention to time. We had a client out of Ottawa, Canada. They put a meter on how many meetings to get ready for meetings, And by cross-pollinating the average hour of each person at the meeting, we then realized a lot of those meetings could go away. So giving back people's time, whether it's a client or a business unit owner, time is money. So if you can quantify that with your data, you're going to get a lot of years opening up and seeing where you're wasting time instead of getting in front of your clients.
Love that.
I wish they could take a look at my calendar. But yeah, that's very true. And it goes back to one of the points that I made before with the data silos existing. So many individuals are spent cleaning data for 8+ hours a day, just so that at the end of the week, they can make a report and someone will take a look at it. But imagine what they could have done with all the time savings if they weren't.
Yeah. And then duplication. Like I know there's a lot of people duplicating the same thing because they think, like they should do it in that silo. And then you're like, oh, wait, this other person's doing it. But now my calculation, like she mentioned the decimal point, right? Like my calculation's different than them, but it's the same piece of data. So it's, there's just a lot of those challenges that we face. I'm getting a lot of head nods, so I'm guessing a lot of people here are facing that as well. All right, so we're going to move on to data strategy. So I think the timing of this is different at every organization. It could either happen with the business case and you're providing that strategic plan, or even in our case, we actually got the leadership buy-in and then we spent the time to build out the data strategy for what we are going to put forward. So just thinking through this high level kind of overview, we really started with our customer needs, understanding their pain points, understanding what their wants, needs, dreams are of this data. And so, spending that time with each department to gather use cases, we basically went to each department and said, what are all your use cases with your data? How can we reduce the time that you spend on trying to solve for those things? Because modern engineering can maybe make that easier for you, right? And so really understanding your customer needs, again, going back to that concept that it's a mindset and that you're putting your customer first. And then defining that vision statement. So again, you can either have this, when you're trying to build out the business case, or you bring your stakeholders together. In our case, we brought them all together and said, what do you want out of this transformation? What is the product that we're trying to build? And really having something to anchor to then kind of drive your scope, right? Because you can solve the world if you really wanted to, but at the end of the day, there's a finite time that I'm sure budget will allow for. And so really having that vision statement to set your guardrails, but also to anchor to. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more on the next slide. But really talking about, earlier I mentioned, understanding your company's strategic objectives. I think even at this level of building out a data product, you're going to want to make sure that you have some objectives, right? And so that when at the end of the day, when you're saying you're done, what does that look like? Did you actually meet the objectives that you set in the beginning? And it doesn't mean that you're not going to revisit it a few times. It just means that you need to start, you can't start with a blank slate. You need to come up with what are some of the goals that you really want to have. And then this is where we start getting a little bit more tactical, right? Once you have the vision statement, once you have your objectives, it's really about starting out those frameworks and processes that need to be in place so that you can start executing. And so in our case, again, going off of the data transformation and the pillars that we had to build out data governance frameworks. We had to build out processes for executing the engineering pieces of it. We started to have to do, BI rationalization processes. So none of that was really there when we got to my client. And so we really had to build that out so that, again, you don't have this blank slate and you're like, okay, I'm going to move some data from the system into this data lakehouse that we're doing. We were actually thoughtful about it and building out these frameworks to follow. And then, I think most either aspiring or veteran product managers in here know about the roadmap. There's nothing without building a product without a roadmap. So you really need to have that path and way to go. And again, not that things won't change, but you need to know where you're going. And then identifying the MVP. I can't speak enough about how important it is to have a most viable or minimal viable product so that you can test all these things, right? So, you can build out a strategy all you want, but until you start executing it and then also testing it, you really won't know what your misgivings are, right? And so we actually deployed in September, so super happy about that with our MVP, and we learned a ton. We learned where we need to refine our processes. We learned where, we did really well. And it's, again, being agile, being nimble, being flexible to your processes and your strategy to then, again, plan for what that MVP and those future releases are going to be. So at the end of the day, really what I want you to take away from this is it's still customer centric. It's the key to provide a value driven strategy for your organization. And then also I will be remiss if I do not say the collaboration between business and IT is huge. I think a lot of times sometimes it's IT led. Let's move, data from one system, a whole system into the data lakehouse. Well, that's not going to work if you don't really know the business objectives of that. Because are your users really going to use if you move one system's data into the lakehouse? No, they might use it when you're joining all this data together to then form that data product that you have. So that IT business collaboration is huge.
It also helps teams keep each other in check because they help each other set realistic expectations of what can we do in this specific set amount of time and what can we do with the resources we have available. And it also helps kind of build trust among teams. Melinda mentioned that we kind of redid our end-to-end process before going into deployment a couple weeks ago. But a couple weeks ago, what day is it? But something that we've realized is as long as we're constantly communicating with our teams and listening to what they're really saying to us and what they're like assigning sprint points to our sprints and making sure that everything is realistic, that was a huge help. So having that collaboration between business and IT really made sure that, we're progressing at a good rate.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the vision statement. So this shouldn't be new to some product managers. I'm really big on this. Like, I feel like you need to have this at the very beginning. So again, that you build out that vision statement and have your vision board. And so really starting with that target group, who are your users? Who are your true users? Because you can do interviews across the organization, but who are the people that are going to be using this data product? So understanding those people, then understanding their needs. So again, once you have done those interviews and now you know what your target group is, go back to your use cases, see what those needs are from them so that when you're solving and making a solution, you actually know that you're building the right product. And then the data product that's being built, like, is it a data warehouse? Is it a dashboard? Is it an AI ML model? What is it going to be at the end of the day? At the end of the day, you should define it because again, you don't want to leave that loosey-goosey because then people will be like, oh, but I want this and I want that. And, and then it just goes off the rails. Business goals, it always goes back to those objectives, those goals that you're trying to meet. So like brainstorming with your key stakeholders on this kind of stuff so that they're part of the process and it's not just, us product managers trying to tell them this is what you need, but actually bringing them along the ride will make this vision statement a lot more impactful. And so once you like crowdsource all of that information, it's really coming up with that North Star. It's coming up with that vision statement that's going to embody what that data product is, and then be able to always come back to it. Because it's so easy to just make a vision statement and then never look at it again. But you really want to come back to it and say, okay, I use it as like scope, my guardrails of like, okay, you asked me for that thing. Actually, that doesn't even meet the vision at all for this product that we're trying to build. So I'm going to say, maybe we'll come back to it, right? But really we have to kind of keep that confined. All right, so we're going to keep going. So I'm going to pass it off to Karina to do some AP.
Melinda, so now let's talk about crafting a strong data strategy. So just like you can't build a house without a strong foundation and you can't read without your ABCs and Ds, you can't craft a strong data strategy without your ABC and Ds either. So important things to consider: alignment from leadership, building frameworks and processes, making sure that you have a strong consumer-centric mindset, and developing a roadmap. All super important areas that we've touched on today. And then other key areas to focus on: data governance, business intelligence, data engineering, and change management. Like we've said before, if your data isn't governed, you can't really do much with it. I mean, anybody will do whatever they want with the data, but you won't actually have the insights and value that you want from it. With business intelligence, making sure that you're creating frameworks for workbook rationalization and workbook certification. Data engineering, making sure that for your different architecture moves that you're going to be moving your data through, we're focusing on a medallion architecture, making sure that the organization is aligned to how that data will be moving. And change management, making sure that you're creating learning journeys for the stakeholders in your organization so they properly know how to use the data and know how to work with everything that you're providing for them.
I'm just going to add something here because I feel like, change management in this process of it all sometimes is, not as important, but it is, right? Because there's not going to be a good or successful data product without adoption. And to get them there, so like in our instance, we, these folks have been using the same type of technologies for like 15 years, right? And so it's hard. It is hard to think about, well, I've been using, the EDW forever, and I know how to get my data. I know what it looks like. It's a mess, yes, but I know how to get it, right? And so that change management piece is huge because, we're going to take them along the ride, and it's scary. It is scary. We talked about garbage in, garbage out, and they're like, they don't even think about that, right? They don't even think that like, it's going to be that hard. They're like, oh, just mimic what we're doing. Like, we don't need to have anything new. It's working. But in reality, it's not scalable. It's not able to really move with the industry. It's not able to move with the technology. And so bringing them along the ride and saying, we're not going to leave you alone. We're not going to, you're not in this alone. We're going to provide, she mentioned learning journeys. So our change management team is creating learning journeys for them so that they understand our tech stack, right? And they want to, so they can, again, not feel so alone, not feel like they have to learn this new technology that's scary. So really providing them that journey to say, here's the fundamentals. Here's what you need for your persona and your job. Maybe you don't need the full on, like, let me do a query in Databricks and do all of that. Maybe I just need to know enough to consume the data and see the data in a different way. And that's kind of like, I just want to call that out because that's a big learning for us. Yeah, go for it.
One thing that, so from the adoption piece, that can be challenging, especially if you have people that have been around a while and they, to your point about the Databricks, like they do their own queries and they're like, hey, I need this, I trust this because I built this query. But then when you're trying to implement a new solution that's supposed to be adopted more broadly, those people can be pretty stubborn. So yeah.
We're definitely heavily relying on our change network that we've instilled across our organization, and word of mouth definitely spreads quickly. So for the few use cases that we were able to already get into the data lake and transform all of that data, it's definitely simplified a lot of people's day-to-day processes. So others who don't have access to certain data elements yet want to access it. They want to see the glossaries, they want to see the dictionaries, they want to be able to query the data. So word of mouth definitely spreads. And
I want to just like piggyback off that a little bit. So like word of mouth on any product, it doesn't even have to be just a data product, but like that can either go the right way or it can go the wrong way, right? And so if they're having a hard time building out a query in this new technology, like let's help them get there, right? Because then they say one bad thing and that negative review, I mean, we all know, right? That one negative review can go really further than any success story can. So really ensuring that you are listening to your users. All of this is kind of circular, right? Because we want you to like really think about, your users and the strategic objectives and what you're trying to put in place, because at the end of the day, your data product will not, if it's not adopted, it will fail, right?
They understanding how you're using. Coming from a company that just changed our entire point of sale system and how we access data. The accessibility from a lot of people and
Wow.
to be able to access. You can understand what I do.
Right,
Like
right.
taking the access to what I do on a daily. Now you want me to rely on other departments that I don't really trust anyway. But I think
Yeah.
people use that data is really, really important for you.
Yeah. And then the silos, right? That's kind of what I'm hearing you say is like there's some silos out there that people are causing for what? Like, I think,
I think ours is licensing. So I don't know how all of it is
that too.
money. It's licensing.
Yeah.
Depending on the stuff.
Yeah.
a lot of that probably could have been avoided if during interviews and use case gathering, if people actually communicated, and requirements gathering could have gone a lot smoother. All of those requirements probably could have gotten into the system.
Thank you all. I mean, this is great dialogue. Keep talking. We're going to go into the mobilization of that strategy. So what now? Like you've built this thing, you've built this roadmap, you have all the frameworks, processes in place. Well, how do I enable that strategy? So key, at least I feel, is finding the right people to build out that data product with you, not for you, but with you, is going to be important. So having the right skill set, and then also fostering that cross collaboration, right? So like we mentioned, we have like 4 pillars on ours. We also have quality engineering, we have data engineering, we've got, business intelligence, analytics, all kinds of things. And we're only scratching the surface. We're now going to lead into AI/ML and all of those different use cases that we can, but you have to build that foundation first and make sure that your teams are really gelling, right? And then also utilizing that MVP, like I mentioned before, to gain those lessons learned. Because if you're not doing that, then you're going to be stuck in this process that's not working, and you want to be able to refine, be agile, right? Like, I'm not an agile purist, but I will say that, being able to like switch on the fly and make decisions on the fly sometimes, is good, right? It's hard, but it's good. And then also being transparent, bringing your leadership in early and often. So you got that buy-in from them. Now what? Like, should they know about your data product? Keep selling that. Keep, marketing your data product. So it's not like, okay, next year we're not going to fund this anymore, right? We want you to fund this because it is impactful to our users, to our organization. So definitely be transparent with them and manage those risks because you know that they're going to be there on day one. So be able to get ahead of that and mitigate those risks so that they don't become issues. And then, like I mentioned before, right, you're going to build all of these processes in your strategy. Don't be stuck. Like, I think that's one thing we learned really quickly. So, we have a lot of experts on our team and they'll die by their frameworks, right? And we don't want them to. We want them to change because sometimes change is good. Right? Most times change is good. And then keeping your customers in mind. That's a real big one that we have been talking about. I love that you said that about, your customers. It's like you have to keep them in mind because they're not going to use it. They're not going to want to really unless you really cut the ties, right? They're not going to use it.
Question,
Yeah, please.
comment, I should say.
Yeah.
On having the right skill set. There is, I think the people that are planning this out, the decision makers, need to realize there is a difference between a software engineer and a data engineer. Now, I'm not saying a software engineer cannot become a data engineer, but there is a big difference.
Yeah.
It's very apparent when you work with engineers that come on that are not data engineers.
I 100% agree. I love, she's
Yeah.
like, yes, yeah. Okay, so yeah. I mean, it's so true. I mean, even for myself, I came from a custom app dev world and I'm used to, software engineers. And then I came into this world and I'm just like, why is it so different, right? But I agree, like you just have to treat everybody's expertise in a way that is respectful. So yeah.
It sounds like you guys are going through a transformation, project, and how like sort of the product evolve to. And I usually think of data engineering as like it's typical, like you're not going through a massive data engineering data and how to store the data. So after going through but like after going through this, you see that I think there will always be a product manager helping to manage the ownership of the data, or will it then transition back to like a IT manager who owns it? Or
That's a great question.
I think there has to be, only because there's always going to be enhancements to the data, and you really need a person that's going to be able to connect back to the business and translate those business needs to those data engineers to truly like help propel the data as it continues to go forward. Because it's a living, I hate to say a living, breathing thing, but it's a living, breathing product. So it's always going to have to be managed. It's always going to need somebody to kind of
Never gonna
be
be
able to
less
push it
data.
along.
Yeah.
There's never an end to it either. Once you think you get there, then technology changes, then you have to re-platform.
Right,
And then you have a new data transformation.
So by the time you get there, you have to redo it all over again.
I just think it's so interesting thinking back in all the companies I've had. I don't know if any of them have had a data product manager. They've all lived like in a very, I would say, like reactionary team.
Yeah.
Well, need to do this, I'll put it on.
Okay.
Yeah, on the backlog. Yeah.
I
Thank you.
agree. I think
That's-
we're
that's
talking
the
about that now,
difference of
actually,
seeing
right?
Data as a product. You never looked at it from a product. So it was just another org within the company.
It was another variable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that goes back
And
to like
that's the
the
change.
challenge about being a project versus a product.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Like it's not a project. It is a product. It is a living,
Living, breathing.
living product that really is, it needs to be maintained. It needs to have, and then there's going to be something new, right? Like we haven't even scratched the surface on AI/ML. There's a whole new, capabilities that it can unlock. So, I think to your question, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, back to the whole product mindset. It is a product. You need engineers to build and maintain models. So it's not just a one-time thing.
Yeah.
It's just like with any software product or mobile app, things break, things need to be enhanced, and you need engineers to do that. And it is a product, so it should be managed like a product.
Yeah. I'll go him first and then you, go. go ahead, you.
Me?
Yeah.
So knowledge management was not a big thing like back a decade, but right now, like, do you guys have a dedicated knowledge management segment in your bigger company? And how do you ensure like data integrity, data ethics, data privacy, transparency in your organization?
Goes back to governance, right? I mean, really, you have to have some good governance frameworks. You have to have, we're building out data governance, a DGO, where, you know, you have data owners, data stewards that you really, and again, they're from the business, right? So they're owning that data so that, again, when I got there, they basically would go to the people they know that does the thing, that knows the most about the data and says, hey, can you create this insight for me? Can you do this dashboard for me? But now we're enabling and empowering them to have data owners, data stewards that really help govern that so that they worry about the security, they worry about like the policies that need to be in place in order to abide by the laws now that you know we have around data. So, you know, having that data governance structure, even though, you know, people kind of are scared of the word of being governed, it's a real thing, and I think it's using it to their benefit and also educating them, right? Like they're like, I think one of the biggest pain points I heard is, I don't even know how to look up the data, or I don't have a standard name for customer, right? It could be a member, it could be customer, it could be a user. So it's like, oh, well, let's govern it and call it the same thing. And then you'll be able to look it up in your data dictionary, right? And so hopefully that answered your question. Okay, thank you. Yeah, back there.
Yeah, I love the conversation. I love the data as a product that you guys brought up and like the customer centricity around this. I mean, like thinking about your MVP and map of being use case driven and like in reality, I've often found with like data transformations or like data teams that come together, you spend so much time up front on the architecture that you end up like in a year-long discussion just around like, how are we going to architect this and what are all the data things that are coming in, and you lose sight of that use case. I'm curious how you worked with your leadership to actually move towards like, how much of that architecture do we need to build to get to a first use case to prove that this data product is worth building X, Y, and Z after?
That's a great question. I feel pretty successful in what we've done. We really started off with the strategy piece, and that was defining the architecture. What was the infrastructure going to look like? What are the standards we're going to put in place? What are the ingestion patterns that we're going to have for this product? And then like that's been our guide post to pretty much everything. And does architecture have to change? Sometimes, right? Like we have to go back to it and iterate through it. And so I think it's that. It's like if you build a really good strategy and spend the time up front doing that, then it won't be so difficult to do that, right? Like, so I think we spent like 5 months on the strategy, and not many people will do that. Not many people will allow you to do that at your organization, but the payoff on it is huge, right? We were able to deploy our MVP 4 months later after that, right? And so, and then are we learning? Are we changing? Yes. Are there challenges? Absolutely. But I think it's really setting that time to plan, and not many people want to do that, but it pays off.
And in parallel to like writing those frameworks, we were also making sure that all of our data governance frameworks, all of our business intelligence frameworks and change management was going on in parallel. So all of those facets kind of played into each other, and we made sure that everybody's accountable.
Yep. So take one more question. I'll get you in the back, and then we're just going to close up because we got the 5-minute marker. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so circling back to the previous discussion, the movement from project-based industry to product-based industry, is it because of business agility and like businesses started to break down the problem into more granular level, or it's like a completely different?
I think it's just about that mindset, right? It's like, for us, they tried doing this transformation in a way where like it was IT driven, and it was moving from one system and trying to move that data, but no one was really using it in a thoughtful way. And so changing it from that project to a product, you start thinking about the user more, right? And you start thinking about what are the needs that will actually enable the business to make decisions, right? That are less on intuition and more data driven. I think that was the piece that really helped them kind of shift into that product mindset. And so for me, as you know, as a consultant to her organization, it's like great to see that they're like, oh, you know, our users, like we want this to be successful. And I'm like, yes, you know, and I know we did our job in treating this more like a data product.
And I think the customer empathy part of design thinking is also big picture in product based, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I mean, you can speak to this more because you work there, but like, I think that understanding their needs is huge. And like, you listen to their processes. So it's not just like, oh, let me interview you, ask you a few questions. Tell me about your day to day. Tell me about what you're doing with data step by step. And then you're like, why are you doing that much? And trying to think through that and empathizing with like, okay, we can make this easier for you. It can be more efficient if we do, if we do something different.
And not only focusing on your internal customers, which is like the business, but also external customers and who the business is selling to, because whatever they're using that data for, it then translate out into the real world. So anyone from here can possibly be using that product. So we just got to make sure that we're making everything as available as we possibly can.
All right, so let's close out. We're going to give some key takeaways, some considerations. Don't be a stranger. We're going to be here all day. If you have questions, we're here. So go ahead, Karina.
All right, thank you so much. So just a quick reminder, 4 key considerations: executive sponsorship. Make sure that you find your champions. Make sure that you're spreading the word about your product, engaging with leadership early and often. Don't give them like a quick run by of what you're going to be doing, and then 5 years later say, oh, by the way, I did this project. It finished 3 years ago, but we never told you. Make sure that you're constantly communicating all of the milestones that you're hitting, because it really is an important piece of the organization. Writing a business case, defining clear goals and objectives, and making sure that you're sticking to those goals and objectives. And sometimes things may change and things may kind of throw a wrench in your roadmap, but as long as you're kind of achieving the milestones that you set in place, that's all that matters. Data strategy, identifying risks and planning mitigation strategies early and often. Even the risks you don't plan for, they're always going to pop up. There's always going to be something. So make sure that you're able to kind of be nimble and navigate through those. And mobilization, once you define your strategy, write your business case and gain sponsorship, make sure you're being able to bring your data strategy to life.
All right. I think we're just at about time. Any questions? Just want to, thank you all for being here today, for interacting, talking through things. Do we have any minutes left? All right, go for it. Like, any questions? Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier about a data literacy program.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions on how to set one up, or like what sort of things to include in that?
Yeah.
Because, I've been in technology so long, like a lot of data is like kind of second nature to me, at least I feel that way. But there's some other folks that they get in front of a computer, or, they start seeing data screens around the shop or whatever, and they're like, what to do with that information? I don't know how to care about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it goes hand in hand with change management, right? Data literacy. So we have our business intelligence pillar, who is really driving those needs as well. And so it's partnering with them to like understand those personas. We really started with personas and saying, okay, across the organization, who's an analyst, who's maybe a data scientist, just so that you can cater that learning to them. Because you're right, we're not going to teach someone that just consumes data how to do data science, right? And so being able to meet them where they're at, because if you don't meet them where they're at, that literacy that you're talking about, they're like, so what? Like, why do I care about this? And it's also explaining to them the why, being able to describe to them, like, this is why we're doing it. This is a good thing. Remember those pain points, always go back to the pain points they mentioned, because then you're also catering to them, right? And saying, okay, your pain points were, I don't understand the data across the organization. I don't, it's really hard to join my data with one another from table to table. Okay, let me figure out how to help you do that. And so that's one way. Another way that we've done, because not everybody's going to go into the database, right, and join their own thing, right? They're just not going to do that. And so how do you make that easy for them? So for us, we're building out data sets. I think somebody mentioned it. I think you mentioned data sets earlier, right? And so we're creating data sets for them to be a lot more consumable. So understanding their needs, understanding where they're at, and then being able to provide that to them so that it is usable, it is adopted, and you can bring them along the ride. Hopefully that helped out. Yeah, go for it.
Sure, it's data governance. How do you push that governance to the edge? These states we're battling right now with client base. Salespeople aren't putting in the actual source of their data.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean anything to them until you tie a commission payout to it. What would you suggest making sure your data's clean coming in, or just little tricks to make sure that, you know, quality's coming in, but also incentivize carrots to kind of
Yeah.
value.
Yeah, I think that, and you can add on, we're actually dealing with this right now where, you know, we're leading these data governance workshops just across the organization. And they're telling us their pain points. They're talking about, oh, you know, like the application, it doesn't have any validations. So how do I do that? So what we're doing is we're taking this feedback loop and now filtering it back up to the application teams to then say, hey, you know, this application, AKA Salesforce, that you maybe didn't put validations in, you have to, right? Because we're not going to be able to catch every little problem. I think there was actually, you want to talk about the scenario we had yesterday about the
Yeah.
one application?
We have a system and we thought that there was going to be a standardization for like addresses. And very late in the day, we found out that the city field is freeform. So everything else is in USPS format except the city. So that's an exciting challenge we're gonna work
Yeah.
on Monday.
And then, but the ask from the business was, how are we going to solve for if it's misspelled? I'm like, that's not something we may not be able to solve for. So now it's that feedback loop from our team, including governance, to say, hey, project team, you're building out this new application. Like, this can't be a thing. We can't fix this problem. And so if you're trying to join and find this, and marry these two pieces of data, how are you going to do that?
One is you can get a zip code city name database.
There you go.
That'll help you with that. But we did a project recently where we put something in the pipeline so that your open AI standards had to tag every field going in and out endpoints, match it to a data governance field. So that data governance field not only told you what this thing was supposed to be called, so you couldn't change it out to clients, customer, but it also told you how to validate it.
Love that.
So that's kind of like what we've been doing with our data stewards and data owners. As we're kind of going through the different use cases in our backlog, we're making sure that the business and the owner is truly defining what that data should be, what that piece of data should be called across the organization, so that we don't have 7 different teams calling it 5 or 6 different things. It's just one standard name across the organization, and then making sure that that's properly defined so that people who don't typically work with that data know exactly what they're looking at. And that channels back to the sales directors too, because they don't always know what the ins and outs of what the data is. But if they have that data clearly defined and they actually have a dictionary in front of them, I think it'll be easier to also work with that change.
Tag it all on the API endpoint.
Yes.
And the front end can see that tag, put up a box. So when
Yeah, we're just getting into tagging. I love that.
and pull in
Love that.
I'm curious if you run into this challenge that I have at Walgreens with leadership. You mentioned the importance of a business case and trying to help them change their mindset from project-based versus product-based.
Yeah.
The problem is money, right? Budget.
Always.
They say we're expecting this outcome out of you. We have this amount of money. They want an end date. They don't want to
Yeah.
when they think of product, they say, well, that's just going to be an unending money pit of things that I'm going to have to keep. Which in reality, it probably is going to be
Sure.
if you don't have an end date. I was wondering, do you run into that challenge when you're
Yes.
like, are you still project-based or?
No, I mean, yes and no, right? Like, I think that when you think about this, it's explaining and bringing them along the ride. Because if you don't, then they're going to ask questions like that, right? And so I think how we're trying to mitigate that is the idea that, hey, all your business users, we gathered over 300 use cases with their data, and that only scratched the surface. Because now we're doing in discovery and we're uncovering like, okay, your group has 5 use cases. Actually, after discovery, it has 30, right?
Yeah.
And so I think they don't realize it until you verbalize how complex the problem is and get them bought in. So it's like being educated, do your research, being ready to have those hard discussions and try. I mean, again, budget is budget, you're right. And everybody, like, I feel like executives have this like, oh, you said 4 years, I expected in 4 years, but we're about to really have this conversation like, whoa, this is a beast, right? And so, how do you articulate yourself to then explain this is a living I keep doing living, breathing product, but it really is. And it's not just a project that you just do and then be done with it. It is your bread and butter of data that you need to be successful, right? So
And sometimes you got to put a dollar sign in front of it and show them that this is how much this costs, but this is how much it's going to cost if we don't make a change.
But yeah, I think you can also like break that out into, like, if they're in a project mindset, then that could map to versions, pieces,
yes,
or things like that. And that, like, here's this set of features or this set of capabilities that this project will contain. And then you just keep adding on to it, like the next version gets dollars, and the next one gets dollars and people, and so on and so on down the line.
agreed.
Kind of like reframe the question in their terms.
Exactly. Going back to catering, right? Catering to their style. So I want to make sure you all go in time to your next thing. You've got like 2 minutes to go to the next one. Thank you so much.
It's like,
Oh, it's networking. We could talk all day.
Networking, socializing, lunch is at 11:30, and then the next session's at 1 p.m.
Thank you so much, everybody. We
Great
appreciate
questions,
your
everyone.
dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you.